Hello, good afternoon.
Good
Welcome,
morning,
welcome.
good afternoon, good morning to the West Coast.
Yeah, I guess it is still morning in West Coast. Welcome. We'll let you guys trickle on in. We are going to be recording this, so if you are here or listening, or if someone has registered for this, you'll get a link to this recording. And I'm Megan with Student Loan Planner and Financial Planner for SLP Wealth, and I'm here with Jake.
Yep, and I'm also a financial planner with SLP Wealth and a student loan consultant.
And we got Travis. What's up, Travis?
Hey y'all, I'm hanging out in the comments today.
Cool. Yeah,
He
Travis will
made a
be in the
brief
background.
appearance.
But welcome. If you have questions throughout our conversation today, feel welcome to throw them in the chat. We'll make this pretty collaborative. If there are some questions that you want to drill down deeper into or elaborate on anything, I will apologize in advance. I'm coming off of a conference today. I was there Monday, Tuesday, yep, and today. So I just got back today, and I know my voice at some point is going to crack. I feel like you can't say that you've gone to a conference and not like totally lose your voice afterwards. So I'm in that boat right now. Probably not going to have a voice by the end of this. So, but all right. Well, we could probably get
Yeah.
on jumped in. I'll go get started. But thanks to everybody for joining in. We're going to talk about money and residency, which I think is a really important topic because this is, this is the time where a lot of these financial things are, it's like the first time you're hearing of them or first time you're learning them or living them. And I think there's some pretty negative feelings around money a lot of times because right, we learn about our student loans like once we graduate and we have to pay bills and we've got like, a residency salary. So it's kind of tricky with money management early on because you guys are so unique in the sense of your income trajectory as well. So
Yep.
that's where I'll kind of lead it over to you, Jake.
Yeah, yeah. So this is probably the most unique scenario for residents and fellows is the fact that hey, we have to go through some time with a lower income, and then all of a sudden we're going to get an income jump in the future, right? But how do you plan for that, right? So especially as you're kind of coming off of probably a large amount of student loans, you probably want to try to play catch up with a lot of the things you might see your peers doing, your other physicians at your hospitals. It can be very overwhelming, and you might be very stressed during this time with a lower income. So today, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. How do you go about, counting or not counting every dollar, but how do you go about managing your finances during this time? Because it can be very stressful, right? On top of, having to do your everyday job and often work very long hours, et cetera, right? So yeah, we empathize with what you guys are going through right now for sure. It's not an easy time. So we're gonna try to relieve that stress a little bit by kind of talking about methods that we try to live by at Student Loan Planner. So
Hmm.
you can see here, I mean, this is just a visual representation, but it's very realistic in terms of like that jump in income. And we know that it's coming, as a resident, that that time's coming. Um, but you can't we I mean we can't really kind of plan too much for it, like in terms of like, hey, we know it's coming, so let's spend everything
Yeah,
today, but we'll
spend it
talk
before
about
we
that.
get it. Yeah.
Right. So we'll, this is the income gap that we're bridging right here. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw in the chat too, we've got someone who's in orthodontics residency, which at the time you're living off of kind of a budget with like the tuition money that you're getting, maybe a small stipend. So I think a lot of the conversations we'll have today are still going to be relevant. So if you're, working, earning a paycheck as a W-2 employee, or if you're still in school, but somewhat budgeting off of the aid that you're receiving at the time, like this will still be super relevant. So let's talk a little bit about what we typically see with folks who are trying to figure out, budgeting their money stuff in residency. We feel some of the penny pinching like vibes from folks. Like I need to be super frugal. I need to be saving every dollar. I need to be, making sure that I'm eating beans and rice through this period. And, there's also a lot of stress because I think friends or colleagues or family members will say, well, you got to start saving right now. You got to, open that Roth IRA, open, a high yield savings account. So you have like the pressures of like, you're trying to get through residency, right? Like you're trying to do, learn your practice, and that's exhausting in and of itself. And then you have all these other like external things saying, hey, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, you should be doing that. So it could be very, very stressful and overwhelming. And I pick on the Roth IRA, but I really just mean like savings in general. Like I think Roth IRAs are super popular and for good reason. There's a lot of great reasons why we should be contributing to a Roth IRA. But we'll talk a little bit more later today about how it doesn't have to be what we're stressing about now. Like this is not the time to be stressing about that in particular. We might also have pressures about, buying a house. We hear in this space, you'll hear about doctor mortgages. Doctor mortgages are marketed to you guys because you do have the income potential. It's not here now. Like we're at the lower income level right now, where we're earning the lowest amount we're ever going to earn. But you have the potential for that higher income. And mortgage brokers understand that. They've designed a product just for you where it makes purchasing a home easier because you don't have to have as much of a down payment to purchase the home, which would be probably a really big inhibitor from you being able to purchase now. So you'll hear folks talking about, oh, I got a doctor mortgage, or I'm purchasing my home with a doctor's mortgage. Or, oh, if you're moving to this city, you should look at buying. Don't throw your money away on rent. Like there's a lot of these like things that are said that make you feel like you need to be doing certain things. And we'll continue to talk about that. And then I do hear a lot about just guilt, the feeling of guilt when it comes to spending money, because dollars are very precious when you're earning what you're earning in residency compared to later. And so every dollar that goes out the door, there's more weight on that, right? Because that $1 can only do one thing. And if it's not doing what you just spent it on, you're thinking, what could it have done for me? So you're kind of in this like loop, this feedback loop of like, I'm trying to get through my day to day. I'm trying to do right by myself, my future self with my money. I'm trying to do what all my friends and family and colleagues are telling me to do. I'm just trying to get by, right? So this is like the tired resident that a lot of times we start working with and talking to. And this is why sometimes money becomes not fun, right? Like it's not fun when we're thinking about these types of things. Um,
Yep.
so let's
And
go through an example while I pull that up. Any comments you want to make, Jake?
I also would say that part of our job as financial planners is we try to reframe that money conversation from viewing it as like kind of like a limiter, like a detractor from what we can't do, to like, hey, how can we use our money to do what we want to do, right? So don't as much as a guilt you might feel about spending money, it's okay to spend money on things that you enjoy. And Megan will go over
Mm-hmm.
kind of scenarios for this, but like, yeah, I mean, the income will come. For right now, it's really all about trying to tread water and just try to maintain a certain lifestyle that you're not overspending, but you're also not like feeling pressured to not spend anything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so let's talk about maybe a typical budget. Now, of course, this could be different numbers depending on where you live, if you're married, if you have kids. There's a lot of different factors that go into this, right? But let's just talk about some common expenses that I see, and let's pretend that this resident is single. We'll keep it easy to start. So we're single resident physician, resident practitioner. We are going to have to pay for where we live, right? Probably, unless you are lucky enough to find a residency position close to home, which is very rare. And you
And then
probably didn't want to
and then
stay
you're living
close
in
to
your
home.
parents' basement, right?
Yeah, right. That might be like when rent might be zero.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you're going to have to pay for where you're living, right? So that's either going to be your mortgage or your rent. I'm just throwing in a number here. Let's say 2,000 a month is our expense. And let's say we don't have an auto loan, like all of these little things here too. This is just kind of a mind jogger. Like, what are some of the expenses that you might have? And this is a good exercise for you to maybe do to carry out some of the things that we're going to continue to talk about, is just take stock in where is your money going right now, or what are your expenses going to be? And to make it a little less intimidating, break it down between like fixed expenses and variable expenses. Fixed expenses, pretty easy. We could probably rattle those off the top of our head because it's a bill that we pay each and every month. And it's about the same for the most part. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we've got variable expenses. So that's where, grocery shopping, gas for the car. It's not necessarily a bill we're paying, but it is money, of course, that we're spending. And it can vary week to week or month to month, even. So break it into those two categories. Start with a fixed because that'll be easy. You'll knock that out pretty quick. And if you're not sure, you can look back at like bank statements. And then variable expenses, go ahead and maybe take a look at the past like couple months, 3 months, 6 months. Sometimes your like credit card company or your bank will provide you with a nice little breakdown. Like a lot of them give you this little pie chart that says, oh, 20% of your money went to groceries and 30% went to, shopping or whatever it is. So they'll kind of break it down for you and you can see maybe an average for what you spend in those different categories. So that's maybe how you can get started with this. Do something just as I'm doing right here, but on your own. And, let's say this person has renter's insurance, which great. Make sure you have renter's insurance if you're renting, or homeowner's insurance, of course, if you're owning. We drive a car, we don't have a payment, but maybe we have an auto insurance premium. And then let's just pretend we're within like a year or two of residency. So we have a student loan payment, right? And if you followed us for a while, you probably know there's lots of little cool tips and tricks that we could use to make that first year of your payment after graduating zero, right? By filing a tax return from last year, the year before you graduate, you probably didn't earn any income. So that tax return is going to show no income. And then when you apply for your income driven plan post graduation, that payment could be zero for 12 months, which is super sweet. That'll really help you like get organized with your budget before you actually have a payment come in. So you probably
Yep.
already know that. We talk about that a lot, right?
Yep. And Megan, you know that student loans might be a fixed expense, but they're variable with your income if you're in an
Yeah.
income driven repayment plan. So you have
Mhm.
you actually have a lot of discretion in terms of like setting up a plan for those student loans, especially early on with the income is at the point it is today, right? Especially coming off of graduation.
Mhm. Yep. So let's pretend this person is within like a year or two of having a payment. So like 350. That was about the amount of what saves payment would be off of a $75,000 salary for residency. So that's about a good approximation there. So variable expenses, again, this is a little harder because it's not the same every month, but get a good average for how much you think you spend or how much you have spent historically. Groceries, you got to eat, you got to feed yourself. Maybe eating out because residency is hard. You got to get lunch while you're there at the hospital. you know, um, you pay utilities, so like gas, electric, water. Those will kind of ebb and flow, but probably be about the same if you annualize it. The average expense. You might pay a cell phone bill, or you might still be on your family plan, which I will say I am still on my family plan. My,
There's no shame in that.
yeah, I'm
The
a,
cell phone works the same way, no matter whose plan you're on, right?
right. They make it really hard to break apart. They really do. So that's okay. If you're not paying for your phone, great. Auto, paying gas for the car, getting to and from work. Maybe I see this a lot now. I had someone literally tell me I should have a category for pet sitting, dog walking. I had like, pet expenses, but dog walking, pet sitting, that might be its own category now because you do work long hours. If you've got a furry friend at home, you might need somebody to let them out during the day, which that is becoming a more common expense.
Yeah. And you have to
Um,
pay up for the good ones too.
Yeah,
So
you do. Yeah, because they're your babies, your furry
yep,
babies.
exactly.
You might have some membership dues, like maybe you pay for a gym membership, paying for your pet's food, cable, or Netflix, however you're doing, like Wi-Fi, your streaming services, personal care, like haircut every so often. Maybe you go get your nails done every so often, whatever it is. And then at the bottom, you may or may not have this, of course, unless you're a client with us, but financial planning fee, maybe you're paying like, $100 for your planning fee to work with us, SLB Wealth. or not. Maybe that's something later on that you would have in the budget. But this was an idea of kind of a typical single resident expense, kind of average expense detail. And so this next page, what this does as the planners, how we kind of analyze somebody's financial, I'd say cash flow. What's coming in, what's going out, is I want to see, what is the income coming in? So we're going to assume this person makes about 75,000. I know residency pay could be all over the place, but we'll kind of use a good average. And then I take a look at expenses down below. And what I look at first, what I'm looking for, why I want to know, like, where is money going, is because I want to see how much of our gross income are we spending on a month-to-month basis on average. What is our spend rate? And our total expenses here are about 64% of our gross income that's coming in. Now, I will say in financial planning terms, like when we learn, what people should stay within, ideally, we want to have our clients within a 45 to 50% spend rate because that means we've got enough to save, we've got enough to protect ourselves with the insurance. This resident is not in that range, right? And I'm going to tell you that is okay. But what you will probably feel and what people will probably make you feel, like if you're listening to, other finance folks or someone who's not in residency, someone who's not working with people in residency, you'll hear people say, like, this is bad. We got to cut this down. We got to cut this down as much as we can. But when I'm looking at these expenses, knowing, we work with physicians all the time. When I'm looking at these expenses, these are not like extravagant expenses, right? We're not spending a ton of money on things that are unnecessary. We're spending money on groceries and eating out, which, yeah, maybe we could totally cut this down, right? Maybe there's a way to reduce some of this expense. But some of our other categories, there might just be not much room to budge unless we were really, really stressing ourselves out to shave down expenses. Especially if we're single, living on our own, not sharing rent, right? This is the biggest expense in the mix, which is very common. Our housing is almost always the biggest expense. Usually next in line is feeding ourselves, groceries, eating out. And then childcare can be one of the top three too, but we're pretending this person is single. So but that's kind of the breakdown. So that's my initial analysis. And that's from a financial planner. What I'm saying is, hey, we are higher than I'd like to see, but there's no wiggle room. So that is okay right now. Right? Because
Right.
there's a couple ways we can make this better. We could spend less or we can make more, which eventually you guys will be making more, right?
Yep. And I also would say
So,
that like that spend rate number, it is tiered by income, right? So
mhm,
obviously the with those fixed expenses that are just stable, like well, typically you don't really have a lot of wiggle room, like you mentioned. The higher income, the lower your spend rate typically should be because there's just certain things at this level of income you have no control over within reason, right? So we're not. I mean, obviously you could say like, hey, I'm gonna, eat like you mentioned rice and beans. That is some control, but you also don't want to sacrifice your lifestyle to try to make sure you're
mhm,
within a certain range, right?
yeah. Well, and this is the hardest time. Like I hear a lot of folks say this is the hardest time of their career. Like school was
Mhm.
hard, but residency was harder, right? And so you have to also give yourself a little bit of grace here with taking care of yourself because if you're not the best person showing up for work, you might burn out in residency, which is not a great place to be. So that's just a little analysis. This is the tired resident. Let me fix this category here, but tired residents cash flow. This is someone who's kind of picking apart their expenses here. Taxes, I put a very normal like tax rate in here, like about 25%. Nothing crazy here. Insurance, like maybe we're paying for health insurance through work. We've got some life insurance through work. We're paying our auto insurance, dental vision, very normal insurance expenses. And then dropping down to savings. So let's talk about savings for a second. I usually really love to see savings between 10 and 20% or more of somebody's cash flow. But again, remember, we're in residency, we're tight. I'm not judging you right here on this 10 to 20%. So 401k, let's say your current employer, or 403b, probably a lot of residency programs are at nonprofit entities or hospitals. But let's say your employer has a match where you contribute a certain percentage, they'll contribute a certain percentage, but you have to contribute to get that match, right? So I'm always a big fan of that. As long as we, as long as it's going to work within what we've got with our expenses. I love the I love the match option that you have with your employer, because that's a 100% return on your income. Or sorry, not your income, your savings, right? So if you do 5% to your 403b and your employer says, hey, I'll give you 5% into your 403b as well, that's 100% return on your money right there, which is sweet. And if you're feeling bad about not being able to save more, remember your employer's contributing too. So that's a really nice. So really this is more like 10%, which is getting us to that 10 and 20%, right? We're getting closer.
Yeah. And let's not forget, like, this money is designed in the 403b to grow for the next 20, 30 years, right? So
Mhm.
this $313 a month and then matched with another $313 a month turns into $626 right now, but turns into like thousands and thousands of dollars based on just that 626 per month, right? So this is the most important time to at least get the match, right? So
Mhm.
that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great. I'm not giving us credit for saving anywhere else, but you might have someone saying, "Hey, you got to open a Roth IRA. You got to open a high yield savings account," which high yield savings accounts are great. Roth IRAs are great. But we've got $168 left over as our surplus, or sometimes I call this like lazy money. Like it doesn't really have a job, but it also might be a buffer, right? Because our variable expenses up here could ebb and flow. So there's not much room for additional savings. So we'll talk a little bit more about what to do about this, or what to do about, making this budget a little less tired, let's say. So let's go into the YOLO resident budget. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Okay. So
First
YOLO
of all,
resident. Yeah,
sorry, Megan, to interrupt. Do people still say YOLO, or is that
I don't
something
know.
from like 10 years ago? Because I remember saying, but
We might
yeah,
be
this
old.
is you only live once, by the way, if in case people don't say that anymore.
I know. Gosh, yeah, man, I'm starting to feel my age more and more these days. So YOLO resident, let's say this is someone who's, hey, I'm gonna come at this in a more positive light. I'm not gonna be as stressed about money. I want to do things to help me be the best person at my job, to be the best resident, the best practitioner. So here's some things that I think I want to show you here on this next budget, but I want to talk about finding a spending parameter, because I think sometimes when we talk about budgeting, like everything kind of tenses up and we're like, ah, that sounds really restricting. And it does. Like, I think a traditional budget has been very restricting. And it's also kind of, it could be complicated. It could also be just a lot of work, because the traditional budget tracks every category of your expenses. So it tracks groceries, tracks gas for your car, tracks utilities. And that is pretty exhausting, right? Like to have to track each and every one of those categories, give it a budget and stay within that budget. It could definitely be effective. Like that could be very effective if you're very organized and you like being very, going through things with a fine tooth comb. Sometimes we have to start there if we don't know where we're bleeding cash. So, not to say that that's a bad way to budget, but I think if we get on the right page with our finances early, we can give ourselves a spending parameter for some of those variable expenses that allows us to not have to track every category, which makes budgeting a lot easier and also gives you a lot more freedom in your spending. So we'll show you exactly how to do that here in a moment. Um, and then leveling expenses. So you're going to have expenses come out at different times per month, right? I think this is a good idea that you had, Jake, with leveling.
Yeah. I mean, it's we have basically 1 month of recurring expenses, right? So if you can kind of batch those expenses into two halves, right? So typically your rent or your mortgage payment comes out on the first of every month. When you're trying to kind of set up spending parameters, imagine if all of recurring expenses came out like the same week. And then all of a sudden your checking account's very, very low because you just spent all of your money on your bills. And you're like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm stressing out, right? Because of my checking account is so low, right? So if you try to level where you can, like there's certain expenses, like I think, cell phone bills typically, sometimes student loan payments.
Yeah,
There's
you could
certain
change your
expenses
student loan ones.
that you can change the day of the month, and it's just kind of like a hack that you can think about to try to like level out your expenses throughout the month to maybe make it not so stressful on that cash flow.
Not so heavy on like the first, or not so
Right.
heavy on the very end. Yeah. That is definitely a good idea. And then credit card hacks. So we're going to talk about our spending parameter here in a moment, but it does have to do with the credit card. So we're going to come back to that once we have more of a visual. And then, kind of like I said in the last cash flow document, there was a little bit of a like, surplus, $168 a month, I think was left over, right? That is close to zero. And that's kind of what we want your cash flow to be, believe it or not. Like, I don't want you to necessarily feel paycheck to paycheck in the negative sense where like, we have no money for like discretionary spending. It's just like bills that we're paying. That's not a good place to be. That's when we would need to maybe reassess some of those bigger fixed bills. But I do want every dollar accounted for. Like I think it's important to know where your money's going and match where your money's going with your personal goals, your financial goals. Um, because it could be easy for money to evaporate, right? Especially when you start making more money and you don't have a plan. So that's what we're kind of leading up to is like when you do start making more money, it is easy, fast, and easy to grow into that income. So this is why we're talking about these habits now, so we could start to, have good habits long term, even when that income is higher. And we're going to talk about getting the employer match. So we kind of harped on that a little bit in the last cash flow document. And I also want to talk about taking care of yourself more. Like, so what our point is with getting a little more positive with our like money and our budget here is that we do want to make room for you to take care of yourself, not cut out the things that you love, because that's what ultimately starts to lead down like a kind of a negative path when it comes to money, like that guilt path of spending money. The cutting things out that we love, that's not going to be a recipe for success to help you get through your residency years. So let's pause and we'll go back to that other cash flow sheet. Let's see. Gosh, I did this last time. I always lose it. I swear, I'm great at numbers, not tech. So, let's see. Here we go. Found it. I have to minimize it before I close out, or else it's gone. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's talk about our YOLO cash flow. Our you only live once. Let's make the best of this. Let's be positive about our money, our spending, our budget. So let's drop down. So this is the same, pretty much the same document as what we just looked at, but I've made some changes, and let's talk about some of those changes. I didn't make a lot of changes, but some changes. So still the same income we're working off of, still the same fixed expenses, you'll notice. So I still have rent. I still have our like utilities that are generally like the same. And then I've got our student loan payment. But what I did is I pulled things out that are variable, that are pretty variable, or that could be put on a credit card, which your rent cannot be put on a credit card, right? A lot of utilities can't be put on a credit card. Um, so everything in blue here are variable expenses. We spend on these things daily or weekly, and they're variable to the extent of we have a little control over how much we spend in these areas. And so what I suggest, what we think is a good way to think about budgeting is to give yourself a spending budget for those categories, right? Because we know that these are the fixed bills. That's what's going to come out no matter what. But the variable expenses are really what we have to pay attention to. And instead of categorizing everything, giving every category a budget, maybe we just total that all up and give ourselves a budget for the month or for the week. We'll talk about how you can calculate it as a weekly number too. And the way we like to talk about this, and one way that I think clients are really successful with this is, a lot of clients use credit cards anyways for spending. Hopefully there's no debt on it, right? If there is, that's something we need to pay down. But if we're just using our credit cards to pay for things and then we pay it off, when at the end of the month or when we get our statement balance, that's a great way to leverage a credit card because there's a lot of protections associated with credit cards that may not be there with your debit card. There's points you can get, cash back, vacation, or like travel points, things like that. So there's some cool things that you could use with your credit card. You just have to make sure you're not paying interest on it. So no debt. Not what we're saying, but this
I
could
always
be a good. Oh yeah, go
Megan,
ahead.
I always say you want to be the credit card company's worst customer,
Yeah.
aka you don't want to pay interest and you want to
Yeah.
use all the points, right? So
Hmm.
their favorite customer is the one that constantly kind of keeps a balance and pays interest and just never pays it down, right? Because that's how they make the most money, right? So
Hmm. Yep. Yeah. Always think about things like that. Like, how do they make money? Because if you have a credit card and you're paying it off every month, they're not making money off of you. But if you have a credit card and you carry a balance, you're paying like 30% of whatever you spent on an ongoing basis, which gets very expensive. So they do bank on that. Now, how we think responsible folks can use a credit card for budgeting purposes is to put those spending items on the credit card each month. And then as soon as you get that statement balance, so there's a couple dates on the statement that you get when your credit card closes out, right? There's the statement balance. There's that's how much you pay to avoid paying interest. That's how much you put on that card from the last bill period, which is usually like 25-ish days, 30 days. Um, and you pay that total amount to avoid any interest cost. There's also like a minimum payment that they'll list, and it's probably really small. It's probably like $100 or less. That's how much you pay to avoid it from being late or for them sending you to collections or putting a ding on your credit card. We never want to pay less than the minimum because that's when it's going to start impacting your credit really negatively. On time payments are like the biggest category of your credit score. So never want to go below that. But that minimum payment is not paying what you put on the card, right? It's just not mathematically. Um, and so we want to pay the statement balance each month to make sure we avoid the interest. And that statement balance can be the gauge for your budget. So if we have a spending budget of 1,300, so all I did is I went back and I added up all those variable expenses. And I think I rounded just to get me a clean number. But 1,300 was about the total cost for those variable expenses. So I'm giving myself a spending parameter of 1,300 each month. Or you could break it out into a weekly number. You could just divide it by 4, or I did a more like technical calculation where I multiplied it by 12, divided it by 52 weeks because there's 52 weeks in the year. Some months you'll have 5 weeks in the month, right? Um, so 300 a month or 300 a week is what I got to for the weekly budget number. Now, clients tell me, this I actually use this for myself, so it's not just me saying this, but clients tell us that this is super helpful because if they have a spending budget that they know they have to stay within during the month, by the time they're getting closer to their statement balance, they can see where their balance is at the time. And if they're under 1,300, they're good. They're doing good with their spending. If they're over 1,300, then they're realizing, oh shoot, what happened last month? What did I overspend on? And if we're gauging it from a weekly perspective, like what your balance has grown to, that can give you a pulse for how you need to spend next week. So if you bought some like concert tickets, this week, maybe it pushed you over that 300 a month or 300 a week. That just means that next week you have to really cut down on what you're spending on. Like maybe we don't go out to eat, or maybe we pack our lunch for a couple days, something like that. So it's kind of like a pulse check on your spending on a weekly or on a monthly basis. And it's using the credit card to do that. But does that make sense, or anything you want to elaborate on there, Jake?
no, yeah, I think this is very much like I don't know if anybody's tried the Weight Watchers diet, but it's basically like a point system that you have at the start of every week or every day. It's not like you have to eat broccoli 5 times a day and like a certain thing, 2 or 3 times a day, whatever. And people just tend to follow something that's not as restrictive, right? So if they have a little bit more discretion, just like
Hmm.
this, you have $1,300 every week or every month to be able to spend. I mean, maybe one week it's concert tickets, maybe the other week it's not really a whole lot, and I just want to buy a new TV or something like that, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, so I think
Yeah.
it's a tried and true kind of method, and it's very less restrictive than counting pennies.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely gives you more flexibility because there might be one month where you have a friend in town where you're going to eat out more, but
Mhm.
you won't be spending as much on, a different category, whatever it is. So it gives you more flexibility on what you could spend your money on throughout the month, which I think gives you some freedom, helps you feel a little more positive about the budgeting idea, right? And the key here, I will say, is as soon as you get the statement balance, go ahead and pay it off right then and there. That's how you know where you're at, right? Because otherwise, you have like your old balance sitting on the card plus like half a month of the new balance. Did you want to jump in and say something, Travis? I saw your face pop up.
I just got so excited. You know what I mean? Um,
Are you nerding out over there? Do
oh
you
yeah,
like my use of Excel
oh
or
yeah, it's
Google
awesome.
Sheets?
So I thought I'd make one kind of quick point, right? So like for the um, we'll like share all the links later and stuff. Some folks are asking for this cash flow sheet that you have in the chat. Um, but like I was just doing some math, right? So I feel like PGY1, I want y'all to challenge me on this, okay? So like PGY1, you should pay 0 a month on your loans, right? Because you're using
Mm-hmm.
your prior year med school returns. Now, if you have a summer recertification date because you consolidate the right way, then you probably should have a $0 payment for PGY2 as well, because you could do a tax return extension, right? And then with that tax return extension, you'd have probably a 30 or 35K type of income that following tax year, like that second, the first full year you're out, right? You'll be reporting that income in like the second year of residency. So in other words, PGY3 should also be 0, right? If you time it all
Hacks.
perfectly, right,
Yeah.
and then the first time they'd find out about a full like 60K resident income would be like PGY4, and then that would be like 200 a month, and that's if like
Mm-hmm.
all of your loans came from med school. If even like probably most people have like 30K of undergrad and like 200 for med school, so their weighted average would probably be more like 9% of income instead of 10, right? When the new rules go into effect, so like that should be like a 1 in 90 a month payment. So I just thought that's kind of interesting, because it's like if you fully hack like the programs, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
99 a month for financial planning is something that a lot of residents feel like they can't afford, but like it probably pays for itself, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think I was gonna put in the links at the end, but we'll probably give people a choice of like the a discounted student loan consult if they just want that one-time conversation, or like the recurring financial planning. But but I think it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like that, you could
Mm-hmm.
get, instead of 350 a month, which is what most people could pay if they're not paying attention, you could pay like a couple $100 a month less, plus have access to someone like you with all these cash flow hacks that'll save the money elsewhere as well. So I just thought that
Mm-hmm.
was I just got triggered by such a high 350 a month payment, Megan. That's
Right. Yeah.
I'll
I try
I'll
to keep expectations like low when it comes to costs. But yes, there's like
Yeah.
absolutely ways we could save on the student loans. That's like our initial bread and butter, right?
Yeah, we
So,
should make another cash flow statement here that says if you work with student loan planner in,
right.
post grad year one,
Hmm.
here's what your cash flow statement could look like here if you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the audio just got really loud. I don't know if it was just me, but probably it is. So I'm gonna go
I think
hide.
it's just you.
Yeah. So yeah, just me. So I'll just go hide again. But I just thought that's pretty cool about just how low you can get these payments if you super optimize. But
Hmm.
people hang out with me in the chat, because I'm wanting to answer your questions if you have any. So hit me up while they're talking.
Cool. Yeah, and any SLP Wealth client has access to these Google Sheets. If you're not an SLP Wealth client, but you'd like to be, this could be something you have access to. If this is something you want to entertain later on, I don't have this as a Google Sheet to use, but it is downloadable as like an Excel, and you could use it as Excel. That's probably the best way to do it. Um, so Okay, so let's jump down. So we talked about spending, the spending parameter, how to go about it with the credit card, which is a nice little hack. Down into taxes, so it didn't change anything there. One thing I do want to mention, though, just from a protection piece, is in residency, you're your youngest, hopefully your healthiest, right? And you a lot of times will have employer benefits like life insurance, disability insurance, which is great. but those benefits are completely tied to your employer a lot of times. So if you leave your employer, you now all of a sudden do not have life or disability insurance. And heaven forbid, but something happens in between that time or in between jobs, we're without coverage. So and we're kind of limited to what we have access to with the employer. Like it may not be a lot of coverage when you're looking at the terms.
Right.
So it is important to consider like your own policy. Is that what you were going to say, Jake?
Yeah, and we kind of go back to that first chart we showed, where kind of like we
Hmm.
see that big ramp up in income. The largest
Yeah,
risk
true.
to that ramp up is the disability,
Is your
because you
ability to work. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. I mean, maybe it's a case of like using that very low or no student loan payment and
Hmm.
open a private disability policy, individual disability policy, but
Hmm.
that kind of, protects your income machine in the future, right? So,
Hmm. Yep. It really does. I think disability is a very aggressive word. Sometimes people are like, I'm never going to be disabled. But statistically, it is more likely for you to be disabled or I'm going to say unable to work in the same capacity. It's probably the better way to say it. So you're hurt, you're injured, or you're sick for an extended period of time. There's going to be a point where your employer is going to stop paying you, right? Because you're not working anymore. You're not full time anymore. And so disability insurance, income protection insurance really just protects that paycheck if you're unable to work. That's your most like vulnerable time. So I'm really passionate about this. I had a client who we purchased an individual disability policy and she ended up having to use it. I never at the time had a client have to use their policy, but thank goodness she had it. She had a really bad time with COVID. It did prevent her from being able to work. She was sick for a very extended period of time and she's still not back to 100%. But her disability policy, the way we built it, still is paying her. Thank goodness. Or else, like, she would have had to move back home. She would have had, just some real problems in her financial situation. So I think, especially single individuals who, you are the person supporting yourself, like, or you are the breadwinner for your family, like, very important. I can't stress this enough. Life insurance is important too. Um, Morbidly, though, you're not going to be here for the consequences of not having life insurance. Disability insurance, you will be. So, um, okay, down into savings. So we're still going with the match, right? We talked about how the match is awesome. It's a 100% return on your income, or I keep saying income, but on your savings. And it's going to do a really great job of helping you save early on, and compound interest is on your side. So you've got more than what you're putting in going into your retirement there, which is sweet. Now, should you feel stressed about putting money elsewhere? So let's talk about it. I think it definitely depends on your goals. If you're someone who's thinking, I really do want to open that Roth and start contributing, great. Let's talk about it. Let's consider it. Let's actually put it into the plan. Let's make it a bill, right? So we anticipate it. But if you're someone who, that sounds nice, but you'd also like to build up your emergency fund, like you want to travel, like you kind of want a vacation every year, right? You want to just get out of town for a week while you're, trying to go through this hardest period of your career. I don't blame you. Like, let's do it. Let's plan for it. So in this example, I'm taking that extra money, that surplus money from the last cash flow statement, and I'm putting it towards that goal. So this is going towards emergency funds or sinking funds. Sometimes we use that word for like things that don't come up all the time, like annual expenses or like, right? Is that how you would describe it, Jake?
yeah, yeah, it's non-recurring expenses, basically, like
Hmm.
vacations or things we can't necessarily plan for. But
Yeah.
basically, the idea is that you keep building up the sinking fund, and then eventually it sinks because you need it, right? And you just
Yeah.
keep building it up, and it sinks. So
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. And so, this could grow to like $2,400 over the course of the year. And, hopefully we didn't need to use it for any kind of emergency. But if we've got some left over, like we could go take a nice, like little vacay somewhere, like pay for an Airbnb, split it with our friends. Like, let's get out of town, de-stress. Let's keep you on the up and up, right? Let's keep you in feeling good and, moving your way through residency. So this is a very proactive way, I think, to take a hold of your finances without it being so negative or stressful, right? Because over here, I feel like we're kind of penny pinching. We're really like tracking every dollar. We're stressing about like where this is going. Over here, we're giving ourselves some healthy parameters, healthy spending parameter. We're giving ourselves, we're thinking about our future too, right? That's something else. And we're proactively putting money aside for a rainy day or for something fun, right? So I think this is a much better way to proactively budget, not reactive, more proactive, right? And this is, I think, a good way to keep morale high, be happier with our money in residency, not feel so bad about what we're spending money on, because as long as it's in that 1300, who cares where that money went? Um, so that is, I think, the difference here between the two. And then we kind of get into the attending physician budget, right? So I'll pull this one back up a little bigger. So all of these habits we're building right now in residency, early on in your financial career, are going to stick with you. They can stick with you long term. So it's good to start building these now because it's going to be really easy, like we've talked about, to grow into that higher income really fast when it starts coming in. Because we do kind of like you said earlier, Jake, like we kind of spend the money before we get it, right? We're like, I want to upgrade my car. I want to buy a house. I want to I want to do this, that, and the other, like whatever it is, which that is okay. We can totally be thinking about these things. Let's just be like proactively be also like planning for them, like preparing for them. Um, so we're going to go through an attending budget here in a second. We're going to have a larger income, so we will more easily be in the spending parameter, that healthy spending parameter, right? The 45 to 50%. What we think is going to be super helpful is some automation of spending and savings. Some automation takes a lot of the like thinking out of it. So putting more money into our 401k directly from like the percentage that gets taken from your paycheck. Maybe even setting up like a auto save amount that goes from your paycheck to your second checking account or your savings account. Like just get it out of checking, get it out of there. Like have somebody else put it in there for you. That's a lot of
Yeah.
options for a lot of employers, right?
Yeah, and I would say that like this is to me the most important thing about cash, what I call cash flow allocation, right? So the income comes in, you have your spending, and then what else? What's next, right?
Mhm.
Because you're always going to come up with some sort of excuse as to, hey, I'll do that later. I'll save that later.
Mhm.
I'll invest that later, right? So there's always going to be something that kind of pulls you in other directions when you automate. And this is why 401ks work so well, 403bs work so well, because it just comes through your paycheck and you don't really see it come out of your checking account. And then next thing you know, you check in every couple of months and wow, I've got a ton of money in there that I didn't
Mhm.
even kind of realize that I was saving that much, right?
Mhm. Yep. So I think that automation is great. We'll talk about employer accounts. So the maximum you can contribute to your employer 403b or 401k is 23,000 starting this year. So a pretty big bucket, right? I think we were doing just 5% on our residency salary, but in the future we'll have our attending salary. What is maybe a good thing to do is to go ahead and rip the band-aid off as soon as that higher income comes in and go ahead and just max out the 401k, the 403b. 23,000 a year when you're thinking about retirement, like being able to retire, live off of the savings that you've, saved and accumulated and hoarded over time, like retirement is going to be your biggest bill. And how much you start saving now is going to have, again, the value of time on your side or the benefit of time on your side. So if we could go ahead and just start saving, max out the account now, we're not going to have to like we're already going to be used to it not there, right? Because if we started with like just keeping the 5% for an example, then we have to graduate back into that higher like 23,000 amount when we could just jump into it from the beginning, kind of like ripping the band-aid off. Um we'll talk about
So
backdoor Roth. Oh yeah, what were you gonna say?
So Megan, I just did the math on my compound interest calculator app that I have on my
Yeah.
phone.
Perfect.
So yeah, so ignoring employer matches, 23,000 right now is the employee limit for a 401k or
Mhm.
403b in 2024. If you did that every single year without even growing that amount every year of the contribution for 30 years, that's $2.6 million if it grows by 8% a year, right? So
Mhm.
that's in itself, I mean, it's just a massive amount of money
Mhm.
that you just automate and just kind of make sure you're doing it every year.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And so, and then, the question, further planning will come into like, well, how much do I need when I retire? Is 2.8 enough? I don't know. It depends on what you want to spend on in retirement, what kind of standard of living you want.
Mhm.
So it may not be enough for some people. Like if someone is traveling a lot, they've got family all over, they want to take larger vacations, like that may not be enough. So then that's where like the backdoor Roth could come in. For others, it might be fine. So that's where like personalization in your plan certainly comes into play. And then, we'll talk about saving for other goals too. So let's get into our position cash flow. And then we'll jump into some like actionable steps y'all could take. So I know we're running up on time. Okay, so let's pretend this this tired resident turned into a YOLO resident, thriving with their budget, thriving with their cash flow, and now we're now a successful attending physician. So let's pretend our income is about 200. I know that's all over the place too, depending on where you live, but let's just say 200,000 is our gross income. Let's say, of course your housing situation may change. I'm just going to keep those numbers fixed for now. Your student loan payment may go up. Again, that might be delayed though for a while, as long as we're doing some cool planning with your student loans. And let's say we bump up our budget. Like maybe we bump it up from like 1,300. Let's add another 1,000, 1,200. Let's really ball. you know, who knows? This may not be enough for some folks, but let's just go ahead and like
Ball is a
increase.
subjective word, by the
Yeah,
way.
right. Totally subjective. But let's go ahead and increase the budget. And even with that increasing, like almost double, we're at 37% of our gross income going to these expenses, which is lovely, right? Because
Mhm.
we need to be between 45 and 50%. There's some wiggle room for maybe a higher housing cost or, other like maybe a car loan if we do want to go upgrade our car. So there's wiggle room here.
I saw somebody
Now,
put in the chat that when they upgraded from like their 2 bedroom rental to a like a 4 bedroom house that doubled, went from like 800 a month to 1,600, it felt like a
uh-huh.
mansion. Like
Oh,
this, if
nice.
we lay the foundation of $1,300 a month in
Mhm.
residency, and then we make that transition to attending, you double your monthly spending budget. It's gonna feel like you're
You're
very
gonna
wealthy
feel,
just because you're so
yeah.
used to it, right? And that's all about laying the foundation.
Yeah, exactly. You'll feel like a king. I tell folks all the time, like when this happens, like when we transition into this stage, like you're gonna feel rich and it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
So dropping down, I kind of put in that, yeah, we went ahead and implemented individual insurance. We did the responsible thing, protected our income, protected our life. And then I put a lot of colors in here for savings. I really wanted to max out the 403b. I wanted to rip the band-aid off. That's what we did. I wanted to kind of keep money going into that emergency slash sinking fund here. I'll go ahead and put the name back on there. Um, so we'll just keep money going in there. 500, this is just kind of a number. So don't take any of these numbers like to heart, but we're going to keep 500 going in there. House fund. Let's say that this person is, hey, I do want to buy a house and I'm probably going to need a fixer upper depending on the area I live in. I'm also going to need some extra cash to like, do new floors, painting, whatever. So let's start saving for that. Let's really start to shovel some money into that house fund. I want to travel. This person wants to travel. Great. Let's make a travel bucket. So this is where we're really like turning on the faucet of like, we're spending more, we're saving more. That's the big thing too, is like not only are we spending more, but we're saving more and we're proactively thinking about where we want that savings to go. And it needs to align with your goals.
Mhm.
So if you're wanting to purchase a home, great. Let's align our savings goals with saving for that down payment or saving for that
Yep.
home. So,
And
or
and
travel
this
too.
is, yeah, this is where financial planners really come into play because I mean, let's say you're married, you have a spouse, and you guys come together and say like, okay, now that we have this income, like what do we want our lives to look like, right? And so we basically come up with descriptive goals with a dollar amount, with a
Mm-hmm.
timeline, and we are basically the kind of quarterback to kind of connect where you're at now to those goals. And this is the buckets that we use, the automations that we use to get there.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
really an awesome process, especially for newlyweds.
Yeah. Like literally, physician or resident physicians are some of my favorite folks to work with, or folks right out of school, because this income is new. We're trying to set like a really healthy foundation, and we can get a lot of that healthy foundation laid and like really do great work with your money, your budget, your life, because your money is a tool to build the life that you want. And so that's what we're doing here. We're trying to get through residency, right? Let's get through it. Let's make some smart decisions with our money, but also let's get to that next step in the future where we can really start to design your life how you want your life to look, which is exciting. So let's jump into some things that you can do now to get organized. I'll make this a little bigger. Oops. Let's see. That's all of our emails. Some of you already have them. Stop. I keep clicking the wrong button. There we go. Okay. So step
Yep.
number one is get organized, right, Jake?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm not, so I know we're coming up on time, so I'll kind of speed through this
Mhm.
one right here, but basically just take stock of everything that you own. If you're newlyweds, think about combining bank accounts, whatever system works for you, just simplify the number of accounts that you have. I see a Frankenstein of accounts all the time
Right.
and people that might have been married 5 years ago, and they're like, yeah, we just never really got along to it. It's hard to manage things with a lot of accounts, right? So
Mhm.
simplify accounts, take stock of everything, consolidate those old IRAs that you got from a high school job or a college job or something like that, right? So we want to just take stock, simplify things, and then we want to set those spending parameters that we talked about already. We want to come up with a solid student loan plan. The earlier we come up with that solid student loan plan, the less we're going to pay over time, especially
Mhm.
as you're going to be an attending physician and maybe already 4 years into PSLF eligibility, right? So you've only
Mhm.
got 6 years to go. You're almost at the halfway mark. And obviously credit card does as well. And then the third here is like we talked about before, make sure you're properly covered because that is the biggest risk of that future income when you're an attending
Mhm.
physician. And then most importantly, this number four here is to just take care of yourself. Spend money on things that bring you joy. Don't feel
Mhm.
obligated to completely cut back on your lifestyle. The income will come, so don't stress out about it, or try not to. I know it's easy to say don't, but try not to stress out about it and just kind of make sure you're focusing on what will really generate that income in the future, and that's being really good at your job, right?
Mhm. Yeah, good and happy at your job so you could
Yeah,
stay there a long time. So,
right.
yeah, very passionate about this for sure. Don't cut out things that you love. Keep them in the budget. So we'll maybe get to doctor mortgages in a future conversation. But I do want to mention just why profession specific planning is so important. And then we'll kind of wrap up. Is that what you wanted to jump into, Travis? Or did you have something to say?
Well, I just wanted to share some special deals for the residents and fellows for
Yeah.
special pricing. I just thought it'd be fun to share
Hmm.
some stuff that we haven't tried before.
Cool.
Um,
Yeah.
so do you want to finish before I do that?
Sure. I'll wrap up really quick and then I'll throw it to you. So yeah, I think profession specific planning is really important because your unique income trajectory is it's very unlike a lot of other professions. And unfortunately, a lot of the financial planning space doesn't want to work with you until you have assets already. And that is not the case with us at SLP Wealth. We, like, you could tell, hopefully, we are so passionate about this, like how you can really set a really healthy foundation from the beginning and build on that in the future. And we want to help you do that. That's like our big goal is to help you get to that point. So we don't have, asset minimums or anything like that. We charge a monthly fee for our service. We work with physicians, daily, that we have a practice dedicated to physicians. So we know about student loans, of course. You probably heard about us first for our student loan planning. We love that stuff too, bread and butter. And yeah, we really want to help you get to your financial goals faster. So I'll flip over to did you want to share the screen, Travis?
Well, I was just going to share two different books, two different links than
Okay,
we usually do in the chat. So the first
sure.
one is just if people only want a discounted student loan consult, right? So I'm putting this in the chat. This is $100 off a student loan consult for new clients. So you might, if you've already done one before, you might be like, dadgum him for sharing that now. I'm sorry if that's the case. But if you haven't gotten a student loan consult already, and that's all you need, that you don't want financial planning for $99 a month, and that'll get you $100 off a one-time student loan consult. And then for people that possibly want to go further, so if you want financial planning, what we're going to do here is I'm going to put another link in the chat. This is a link that will, it's a free intro call link, basically. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of thinking that $99 a month might be in your budget for financial planning because of some of the stuff I talked about, like the strategies to keep your payment low during residency, the strategies to avoid costing yourself a ton of money in interest, if you need to, bridge finance yourself at different times, just things like, should I buy a house or not? Like what type of doctor mortgage or conventional mortgage should I use? Extremely high likelihood that this service will pay for itself. So I've got really two links there. And the intro call, if you do become a financial planning client and also need a student loan consult, you get an even more steeply discounted student loan consult if you also become a financial planning client at the same time. So that link on the screen that you're looking at, folks, that's the link that will take you through. It's kind of like a dynamic like page, which will essentially say like, do you want financial planning? Yes, no. If the answer is no, then it'll take you to the book a student loan consult for 100 off. And if you say yes, then it'll take you to a page where you book a $200 off student loan consult plus $99 a month financial planning with our physician group. So I think, Megan, I don't know if you've seen this, but a lot of places will do free financial planning for residents and
Mm,
fellows, right? It's
yeah,
free. It doesn't cost you anything. Well,
it
why,
costs you
why are,
somewhere.
well, so the reason it's free is because they're hoping either, well, first they're either selling you disability insurance or something like that to make the money on that end, or their, you know, planning fees as an attending are like 10 to 15 grand a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like essentially like emotional blackmail is what I call it, where like, they do work for you at no or almost no cost while you're in training because they know that they essentially know they're going to make a ton of money on you as an attending. And so we don't have that kind of pricing structure. We think that people should understand what they're paying for and pay for something that is valuable, that if they can afford it, they'll get. So, that's the two different routes there. And then, of course, if people are ready to just straight up book financial planning, then you can go to slpwealth.com/book, regardless of whether or not you've had a student loan consult or not with us, and that'll take you to the right place, right? But I just wanted to give people multiple options today. So in the chat is the way you can see this. Is discounted student loan consult if you know you can't afford anything but a one-time event, and then if you want us to help you with a lot of stuff in your life, then you can either use that slpwealth.com/book link to just go ahead and schedule and become an official client for $99 a month. Or if you want to talk about it first, then you can do a 15-minute free intro call with that link we put in the chat. So 3 different URLs
Mm-hmm.
today. And Megan's going to send those links out later in case people are driving or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'll send out or kind of a recap email, a follow-up email after today. But thank you guys for hanging out with us today. We're testing out different times, so I appreciate folks giving us feedback too. Like if 2 o'clock Eastern time is like not a good time, you'd rather it be a different time, let us know because we're trying to find that sweet spot for people to join live, ask their questions live. But I know, something is not going to work for everybody. So, but feedback totally welcome. And come work with us. If you're needing some help with your student loans, we've got you. If you want to really start to build and design that future life for yourself, we've got you. And we could do it with the student loans too. Like, I know that's like the biggest elephant to get started with for sure, but we could start to, once we've got that tackled, we can really be free to think about our future planning and future goals. But thanks, Jake, for joining me today.
Yeah.
And thanks, Travis, for popping in. And I'll let everybody get going.
All right.